use a washcloth when I go to a hotel, and I feel like a black guy when I do it, and I go, there's a lot of things I do where I go, black people would be really proud to know that I do this. You know what I mean? I use a washcloth and I literally go, fucking crackers. These crackers using their hands.
Oh my God, you funny as hell, dude.
Stand up.
Yes, very funny indeed. Thank you to Becky, who sent that to me, Carrie's sister, who many of you met this past weekend at Farm Jam. And hello and happy Wednesday. I have the great Tim Wise, and he was on fire. I mean, he always is, but really happy to have him talking about all the issues that we discussed today. If you want to jump to my conversation with Tim, you can do that right now. It starts at 30 minutes into today's show. But I hope you'll stay for the news, and I've got a great clip show for you, as well as I do, or try to, every day. It's the regular format of the show. So I'll get through your headlines, as well as my favorite clips from the past couple day or two, and then we throw to the interview. Happy to have you here. Can't do it without you. This is independent media, and it's real independent because I produce it, I host it, I edit it, I promote it, and all of the rest. It's just me. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. If you want to go support for as little as $5, I really could use it. We can use it, and you can be a part of our community. You get a lot out of it. We just had our third in-person gathering. It was Farm Jam this past weekend. We're all still kind of there. Those of us who were there, it was inspiring, rejuvenating, and it felt amazing to see so many people and hear how good and safe and fun you felt and had. So I really... I'm still there myself and look forward to talking to you on Thursday night if you're part of our community. I host a hangout Monday and Thursday at 8. I mean, where else can you get this? We're trying to build community. We're trying to look out for each other, protect each other, and keep having regard for each other, as David K. Johnston said on yesterday's show, which was taped at Farm Jam. If you haven't heard it, it's one of the best conversations I've had here in a real long time, according to lots of people who got back to me. All right, let's do it.
It's Pete's Headlines and Clip Show. Get in on the shit show.
Yeah, thank you, John Carroll. I've got your headlines and your clips for you here on a Wednesday in September 10th. You know what that means. Tomorrow is the 11th. And, of course, there's lots to talk about there. But today, where I want to start is in the Middle East, where we got news yesterday in a significant escalation of the war. Israel targeted leaders of Hamas in another country, Qatar, where they were thought to be safe and negotiating. Hamas said the attack had failed to kill its senior leaders, but confirmed that the son of the chief negotiator, his office manager, and 3 other people affiliated with Hamas were in fact killed by directly striking in Qatar, a close U.S. ally and a primary mediator in talks to the end fighting in Gaza. The New York Times says Israel risks destabilizing the push for a ceasefire. Qatari officials condemned the attack, which they said have attacked residential headquarters where Hamas politicians lived. Our mad king of a president likes the Qataris. You know, they gave him $1 billion jet, or $4 billion. How much was that? Whatever. But he said that the U.S. was told in advance about the strike and that it was unfortunate that the attack was in Qatar. But he described the destruction of Hamas as a worthy goal, I guess. Also, Hamas itself claimed responsibility for a shooting at a bus stop in Jerusalem that killed at least 6 and wounded several others. And Israel ordered residents of Gaza City to evacuate, threatening a full-scale invasion of the city. The violence continues and the horror continues, and it looks like Israel doesn't want any peace negotiation until they are done razing and destroying all of Gaza City. So pretty horrific news there. Overseas also should mention in international news a significant escalation in the war in Poland. I meant Russia, but Poland says that it shot down Russian drones that entered its airspace. Apparently up to 19 Russian drones shot down after entering the airspace. And that is hopefully an accident, that they went awry, they went the wrong direction. But that was a frightening escalation, to say the least. And Poland, of course, a NATO country. Our Mad King is reportedly asking the EU to impose 100% tariffs on India and China. So that's going really, really well, by the way. Coming back home, one of the big headlines from the weekend and into the middle of the week, we're still looking at these numbers. I'll have some audio for you in the clip show from economist Justin Wolfers, who's better than anybody talking about it. Job growth revised down by almost 1 million jobs through March, signaling an economy on shakier footing than was realized. Annual revisions to non-farm payrolls data for the year prior to March 2025 showed a drop of 911,000 from the initial estimate. Numbers which are adjusted from data in the quarterly census and reflect updated information on business openings and closings add to evidence that the employment picture is weakening. The economy lost nearly 1 million jobs on paper. I mean, it's a very big deal that is not getting nearly enough attention, if you ask me. But nobody's asking me about the job numbers, so I just thought I'd read that one. We've got some Supreme Court news. They've announced they will decide the fate of worldwide tariffs Trump has used to raise revenue, spur manufacturing, and exert political pressure on other countries, is what I'm reading. The court yesterday agreed to hear Trump's appeal of lower court rulings that say he overstepped when he invoked a 1977 law to impose tariffs on imports from most of the world's countries. The court, which is a 6-3 conservative majority, of course, also agreed to fast-track the appeal, and I'm sure they're going to give him what he wants. We predicted that. A huge good news in New Mexico and a breakthrough victory for any of us who have been pushing for this policy for a long time. New Mexico becoming the first state to offer free early childhood education to every family in the state. The governor of New Mexico, Democrat of course, Michelle Lujan Grisham, announced a universal child care plan that includes higher pay for pre-K educators. Starting November, all New Mexico families, regardless of income, will be able to enroll their kids in pre-K for free. How about that? Also, this does not sound like a tough on crime approach, but the Trump administration is quietly dismantling efforts by the IRS to shut down a slew of aggressive tax shelters used by America's biggest multinational companies and wealthiest people, which is always something worth telling your MAGA, right-wing, conservative friends and family members. Why do we have to pay their taxes, but they don't have to pay their taxes? How come hard-working regular folks have to pay our taxes, but wealthy folks who aren't working nearly as hard, they can just get away with it with all these tax shelters? Why is that okay that Republicans do that? And the Democratic list for the latest January 6th panel probably is not going to make Republicans happy, but Democrats named the members of their caucus to serve on a new subcommittee which is reinvestigating the January 6th, 2021 attack on the Capitol, Republican-led probe that threatens to reignite tensions over one of the most divisive events in American political history. Well, guess who's on the panel? It's Eric Swalwell, Jared Moskowitz, Jasmine Crockett, and Jamie Raskin. That's quite a lineup right there, and we'll see what happens with this latest January 6th panel. And in New York City, Zohran Mamdani has a huge lead in the mayor's race, according to a new poll. I thought that was interesting and worth mentioning. He's opened up a commanding lead in the race for mayor of New York City, buoyed by support for his affordability platform and by the splintered opposition, according to the New York Times. The poll found that 46% of likely voters currently plan to choose to vote for Mr. Mamdani, and he is the Democratic nominee, of course. If the race, which is currently a 4-way race, becomes a 2-way race, well, that majority might narrow, but we will see and follow that closely. And finally, I wanted to mention this. Street artist Banksy, his decades-long anonymity may be at risk after British police launched a criminal damage investigation into his latest mural outside the Royal Courts of Justice in London that appeared on Monday morning. The black and white spray-painted image depicts a judge beating a protester holding a blood-splattered sign with his gavel. The image appears to be a commentary on the arrest of demonstrators back in the direct action network Palestine Action, recently banned as a terrorist organization by the UK government. So, good on Banksy, but are we really going to find out who he is? All right, well, that's all I've got for you in the headlines. Now it's time to get to the clips, the clip show. All right, let's start with this clip from, I think this is MSNBC. This is the economist Justin Wolfers, and I love this guy. He's everywhere, as he should be, because he's real good at explaining things, and I wanted to play this University of Michigan economist for you with his latest analysis that I think is perfect.
We ask deeper, harder, more important questions. Why is the United States rich? Why is Argentina poor, even though 100 years ago it was nearly as rich as the United States was? Mm-hmm. Why is the country I was born in, Papua New Guinea, in grinding poverty? And we've studied this, we economists, for decades now. And the overall answer, there's a complex way of saying it. A simple way is what matters is the quality of our democratic, political, and economic institutions. And so that's things like having an independent Federal Reserve Board. That's things like having the Bureau of Labor Statistics being independent and reporting genuine and true data to each of us. It's allowing people in markets to pursue their passions and pursue their great new ideas rather than have the president suddenly decide that he wants to tell Coca-Cola how much which sweetener to put in its beverage, that he wants to tell Intel that the government should own 10% of it, that he wants to tell Harvard who to hire and what to teach, and he wants to tell Cracker Barrel what its logo is. This is an encroachment of the government into economic life that we've seen many times before in many other countries. This plays out very, very slowly, but has very, very large impacts. It's the reason some countries are rich and some are poor. It's not going to show up in tomorrow's economic numbers, but it will show up by the time our kids get to the table and discover the pie's a bit smaller than they were hoping.
Yes, indeed. God, that guy is good. I have nothing, no notes, nothing to offer Justin Wolfers in that, or in this clip from J.B. Pritzker talking to MSNBC's Jen Psaki, talking about what he's worried about with the Trump administration, the regime, and sending troops into his state in Illinois.
You're saying there's going to be military in the streets that are going to prevent people from participating in the elections. Is that it, or it's something else?
It could be that. It also could be claiming that there's something wrong with the election results or the counting of ballots, so they're going to take control of the ballot boxes. And why do I say this? I mean, why do I suspect that that's in fact what they're doing? Well, look at the history here. Donald Trump encouraged people to be part of a Stop the Steal movement in 2020. When he lost the election, he then went out and fomented engagement in this activity to deny the election, and then fomented the January 6th protesters to do what they did, which is attack the Capitol. And then he pardoned them after they were found to have committed criminal acts. And then let's fast forward to today. He's back in office, and he's talking about maybe people would like a dictatorship. He said that publicly. I mean, that's out loud. You can go look at it. What about his entreaty that, he believes, he's just making things up in his head, that there is fraud going on that has helped to elect people to office. They just recently asked for all of the records of people who voted in Illinois. They want all of the records. Imagine all your private information if you're an Illinois resident who is registered to vote. And they're going to find your home address, perhaps your phone number, your registration, or how you voted last time. This is all what's being requested by the Department of Justice. Think about all those things together. What is the purpose of all of that, if not to focus on interfering with the 2026 elections, which clearly he knows he's going to lose? How do we know that? Because now he's asking states to do a mid-decade redistricting. He went to Texas to try to get them to do it. They've now done it. Now he's going to Missouri and Indiana and other states to get them to do it. And, we have to stand up and make sure that we're focusing on what the real aims are, and that is to thwart the elections to give him more power.
Yes, indeed. More great analysis right there, and terrifying from J.B. Pritzker, but I liked it and thought it was very important to share that he is being extremely realistic and pragmatic and taking action. So I like to see that as well. And this is great. This is from Flea. the very famous musician and bassist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I love the way that he articulates his feelings on Trump and Trump supporters.
Was given money, has only ever cared about anything in his life about getting as much money and power as he can get for himself. He's never been a philanthropic or kind person. He's never cared at all about the poor people in America in any way. And that now all of a sudden they think that he wants to take care of them. That's the part that I don't understand. The Donald Trump phenomenon makes me sad. Mostly puzzling to me because the type of people in the United States that I think take him seriously are people that feel really disaffected by the government, and they're having a hard time and they can't get work and they don't trust the government. And, I don't trust the government either. And they see him as a guy that can help fix it. Yeah, he's like some idiot talking in a bar. Like, these are poor people, and Donald Trump is a guy that was born rich, was given money, has only ever cared about anything in his life about getting as much money and power as he can get for himself. He's never been a philanthropic or kind person. He's never cared at all about the poor people in America in any way. And that now all of a sudden they think that he wants to take care of them. That's the part that I don't understand. The Donald Trump phenomenon makes me sad.
Yes. Well said. Yes. Makes me sad too. All right. Well, my old friend Bill Burr was on some podcast and being very self-aware, but I thought the way that he explained this is the way that I've been trying to explain it for years, just a little bit differently, but same exact points about how we should not act like experts if we aren't any, and we should still give a certain amount of credence and respect to those who are. Love it.
There's a difference between the people that read and the people that are the subject of what you're reading. You know what I mean? There's people that discover shit and figure shit out, and then there's the people that read it. Like, the amount of people that can explain the theory of relativity. That's probably not a lot of people, but they can do it. But then there's this ego thing that because now I can explain it like I'm somehow Einstein adjacent. It's like, no, you're not. You just read some smart shit.
Yeah.
That was a bit I used to do in my act where it's just like, there's nothing worse than when a dumb person reads because now they think they're smart. It's just like, no, you're just a dumb guy that knows a lot of shit.
Yeah.
Like, intellect to me is how you process information. Mm-hmm. It's not just reading a bunch of smart shit, putting in your head and then puking it out at people and be like, in 1492, that's not smart. You're torturing people.
Oh, I love that. I love it a lot. All right. CNN's Manu Raju caught up with a couple of Republicans asking them about the signature that was on that Jeffrey Epstein card that we all know is Donald Trump's, and they're just denying it. They're just denying it. Here it is.
I mean, anybody can do a signature. We've seen the auto pen's been used quite a bit with the Biden administration. So I've never known Trump to be much of an artist either, so I kind of draw that into question.
There's a history of him drawing
stuff. The thing is, it's been there for 4 years, and now it's just come out. I just don't buy it.
So you think really someone might have just forged this somehow and sent this to the app?
Somehow. It's so easy to do. I just don't buy any of it right now because we have a prior administration that's had a history of dishonesty, and they bring something like this out now. Why wouldn't they bring it out during the campaign?
And, of course, these documents were from the Epstein estate, not from the Biden administration. But
that's Congressman Tim Burchett, who's just a complete fraud. But wait, there's more.
From what I see, it's not a signature. I've seen Donald Trump sign a million things.
This doesn't look like his signature to you?
Nope.
Okay, well, that's just two Republicans in Congress just denying reality. What we all know is true, that really, really creepy letter that Donald Trump sent Jeffrey Epstein is what? Real. Okay, what else do I have for you? Here's the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, trying to convince the American people to give up and let the military take over our cities and our streets.
On display, and we need to confirm to the American people that they do not need to fear for their lives when they drive to the grocery store or they pick up their son or daughter from school. This is common sense, and I cannot for the life of me understand how the Democrats think this is some sort of winning political message. Yield, man. Let the troops come into your city and show how crime can be reduced. It's a morale boost for the country, and it's safe and right for everybody involved. So if they want to go down that road, they're going to go down that road, but we're going to keep talking about common sense, and we're going to keep delivering. Thank you.
Oh, wow. There you go. Well, here is now 2 minutes of two very conservative commentators, Coleman Hughes and Ben Shapiro, talking about something they call the woke right. And I think this is worth listening to these two guys talk about their own very problematic right-wing ideologues who they help create and fan the flames of. But it sounds like they're calling them out a little bit, which I like to hear.
People on the what is called the woke right by some now that like to blame everything on, the military-industrial complex or global Jewry, this kind of thing. These are people that have a fundamentally grievance-based relationship to Western society. It's just that the enemies are different than the enemies.
That's exactly right. I mean, on the right, it manifests as a lot of conspiracy theorizing. One of the things I talk about, I think it manifests everywhere, is a sort of conspiracy theory. Mm-hmm. And traditional biblical religion is actually, in many ways, sort of the anti-conspiracy theory. So if you think about paganism in its original form, it was the idea that, as Gloucester says in King Lear, that the gods, strike us down like flies for their sport. That is sort of the pagan ideology. And I would say the post-God ideology is that things happen randomly, bad things happen to good people. You can't control any of that. And then that is then projected into a conspiratorial idea that there must be forces beyond your reckoning who are out to get you. And you can see that on both right and left. The biblical worldview is actually quite harsh. It basically says that if you fail, it's probably your fault. There's a God-centered, ordered universe. If you do the right things, good things will likely happen. If you do the wrong things, bad things will likely happen, right? That's the entire book of Deuteronomy. And so the movement away from kind of personal responsibility and duty, that results in this very conspiratorial view of society in which, again, shadowy forces are out there and they're manipulating you. And if you don't understand that, it's because you now have almost a Marxist false consciousness that has to be opened up. You need to be black-pilled. You need to be awoken to the problems in society that you never spotted before. It turns out maybe America was on the wrong side of World War II. Maybe the moon landing never happened, because the normal kind of response to this nonsense is to say, well, America seems like pretty awesome. Right? You have all these grievances against America, but I mean, let's face it, America kind of kicks ass. I mean, we defeated the Nazis, we defeated the Soviets without firing a direct shot. We have created the single most prosperous era in the history of humanity with the broadest spread of wealth in the history of humanity. We're kind of great. And so the answer to that from both sides is no, you're totally misapprehending history. For one side, it's the 1619 Project. And then, as some folks at Free Press have written, for others, it's the 1939 Project.
Yeah. So which one is worse, do you think? Which one is worse, the 1619 Project or the 1939 Project? So our extremists are apparently just documenting history, the history of enslaved black bodies being brought to America. That's the 1619 Project. But their side is doing the 1939 Project, which is trying to bring back Nazism, fascism. So I think we win because, I said it all. All right. Now time to get to some comedy. I got a little Colbert, a little Jimmy Kimmel for you on tap from last night's shows.
It feels like the stars blindly run and we're careening into a meaningless void.
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you feel that, here's the thing. According to the New York Times, we now know why. Because your zodiac sign is 2,000 years out of date. 2,000 years off. No wonder today's horoscope said I should clear my house of clutter and embrace Emperor Tiberius' conquest of Dalmatia. Here's the thing. Because the Earth, as it goes around, it wobbles on its axis as it goes around the sun, the position of the stars in the sky change, once every 70 years by 1 degree. So that adds up. After 2,000 years, everyone's star signs have changed by a month. I thought I was a Taurus. Turns out I'm a Gemini. That changes everything. Wow. It's like, what now?
I mean, now what?
What do I do now? How do I live my life? It's like thinking you were a Charlotte and then finding out you're a Hufflepuff. It makes no sense. Today, I gotta say this, today Donald Trump's horoscope should have warned him he'd have a surprise run-in with a long-lost pervert, because the story of his disturbing friendship with Jeffrey Epstein keeps getting more. Earlier this summer, the Wall Street Journal reported that back in 2003, Trump contributed to a book for Epstein's 50th birthday, And the letter he wrote was a Picasso of pervitude. According to the Journal's reporting, his note was framed by a hand-drawn outline of a naked woman and featured what appeared to be the future president's signature as a squiggly Donald below her waist, mimicking pubic hair. But wait, there's more. The note read in part, "Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." Trump denied everything and sued the Wall Street Journal for $20 billion, calling the letter, you guys were a little late. Now, calling the letter non-existent. Turns out existent, because yesterday, the House Oversight Committee released it, and whoops-a-puby. That sure as hell looks legit. It's directly from the Jeffrey Epstein estate. It's exactly what the Wall Street Journal reported, and the signature identically matches a bunch of ones from the same era. And you know what they say? If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, that duck should not be allowed within 300 yards of a school.
I've spent the day enjoying what is best described as a full-on MAGA freakout today in the aftermath of this Jeffrey Epstein birthday book. Our leader, Shem Mussolini, did not want us to see it. Yesterday, House Democrats released a disturbing letter Trump claims he didn't write in a book that was given to Epstein for his 50th birthday, a book that it's turned into a gift that keeps on giving. And not only does it contain the now infamous creepy letter and drawing with Trump's signature on it, it holds a number of disturbing photos and notes, including this picture of Epstein holding a check someone made out to look like it was from Trump for $22,500 to purchase a, quote, fully depreciated woman. We know the check probably isn't real because Trump only pays women when they sue him. But you can see this gives you some insight into the fun hijinks and sense of humor Jeff and his buddy Donnie shared with their pals. And while our famously verbose president suddenly has no comment on this, his sycophants are left to defend him. Last night I joked that Trump would blame this on Joe Biden's auto pen, and I was wrong. Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee did that for him.
I mean, anybody can do a signature. We've seen the auto pen has been used quite a bit with the Biden administration, so I've never known Trump to be much of an artist either.
Oh, well, then he couldn't have done it, right? I mean, he's not much of an artist. What are you talking about? He's an amazing artist. He's a con artist. He's a bullshit artist. He's not an artist. He paints his whole face orange every day. No one's saying Trump is an artist. This isn't exactly a Norman Rockwell. No one is hanging this in a museum. Their other proof he didn't do it is the signature. They say it doesn't look like his signature. It sure does to me. Especially when you compare it to other Trump signatures from that era. They're almost exactly the same. They all end with a long D, which I can only assume is Trump overcompensating for a small D.
Yes, there you go. Love it. Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert both talking about the Epstein letter. Yeah. Very good. All right, but now it's time to get to my guest. And he is one of the all-time greats here on Stand Up. We love him. It's every time I get to talk to him, I'm very happy. He's so fired up and brilliant and articulate and passionate. And he's been in the fight a long, long time, and one of my all-time favorites. He is Tim Wise, everybody. He's a senior fellow now at the African American Policy Forum. He's a critical race theorist. Yeah, that's something a lot of people don't understand. You can read him at timjwise.medium.com. You can follow him on Twitter, where he's still very active, and I love it. I was going through a bunch of his tweets yesterday, and good as always, he wrote, "Hey, remember that time Barack Obama wrote a friendly letter to a known child rapist in which he doodled the body of an obviously young girl and mentioned that he and the rapist had certain things in common? Of course not, because that would be absurd." Tim Wise is one of the best. I always love him. We talked yesterday live on YouTube. If you want to watch this, you can. YouTube.com/standup with Pete. Let's do it right now with the always amazing Tim Wise. All right, Tim Wise is here. I've got him, and I'm really excited to see you and to talk to you whenever I get the opportunity here at the end of September, mid-September. I don't know. It's somewhere around fascism, I think, is where we're at. And that's my first question. How are you, and how are you navigating where we're at, wherever we're at? And then I'll ask you to label it.
Well, I mean, it's the same place probably the last time you asked me that question. You know, it's just waiting for the next fascist shoe to drop, and they seem to be dropping every week or so. You know, I don't know how to. I don't know how to navigate a world where, we snatch people off the street, separate them from their families, send them to prisons in foreign lands to be tortured, and also, in spite of all that, have the time to get upset about the changing of a logo of a shitty breakfast restaurant. It's amazing to me that we can do all this at once. MAGA is very, very busy, and they compartmentalize very well. I will say, though, with the Labor Department data that keeps coming out, I think Uncle Herschel might be the only guy who's gotten a job in this administration. So there is that.
I mean, I wonder when the economy's crumbling, which seems inevitable. You mentioned the job numbers from this past month and the month revised before that. When that starts showing up, it's like, it reminds me, some of the things that is doing reminds me specifically on the economy of COVID, when he said at the beginning, it's just going to go away, ignore it. That's just not going to happen here with all of the unforced errors, from terrorists to deporting essential workers. That's going to affect the economy. When does Uncle Herschel find out?
Well, Uncle Herschel may be beyond finding out, because his arteries are clogged by all that cholesterol from the Cracker Barrel food, but the rest of us are going to find out. I don't think there's any question about that. We'll probably find out right in the middle of the third round of that fucking peg game that they put on every table at Cracker Barrel. We'll still be trying to get the pegs in the holes. We won't be able to figure it out. We'll keep getting 3 of them done. We'll get called an ignoramus by a freaking board game. And because this is only a joke that works if you've been in a Cracker Barrel, but I'm from the South and I've been in many of them. And meanwhile, we'll find out that not only can we not play the peg game very effectively, but we're also not going to have a job. The jobs are all going to be gone. We're also not going to have food in the stores, because there's nobody working in agriculture right now, because folks don't want to show up for fear that they're going to get arrested. You're not going to get a home built, because the people that are doing a disproportionate share of the home building are Latinos, not necessarily undocumented, many documented, but they don't want to show up at these sites any more than anybody else does, for fear that they're going to get snatched. So we're going to see, we are in the fucking around and really finding out phase of this. And that finding out is going to go on for, I think, quite a while. So we're in for pretty.
I definitely agree. And it's happening gradually, but definitely, and maybe it'll happen faster, everything that's happening. But I think the timeline it's happening on, it makes it easier for a lot of folks to be apathetic about, not realize that it's happening. Historians tell us, it's always different. It's different how authoritarianism is taking hold in America, but it's happening and somewhat slowly, and obviously in communities, or specifically to specific types of folks that you just don't realize it. You walk around America right now, you can still order things. They come overnight. You feel relatively safe. You feel relatively safe or not. And so it feels like the timeline in which it's happening is helping it happen more effectively, because it's slowly they're taking.
Well, honestly, I don't know how slow it is. I mean, this is pretty fast. We're 7 or 8 months in, and actually this administration has done far more than I think even it expected to be able to get done. And it has done a lot more than a lot of other authoritarian, fascist, and pseudo-fascist governments in history have done. I think we have this weird historical feeling, I think, that fascism, totalitarianism, authoritarianism is always, the dictator comes in and the next day they're putting people on the wall and shooting them. And actually, that's the stuff of movies. That's not the way it actually tends to go down. It tends to be a slow burn. It tends to be, putting the frog in the pot of water and turning up the heat until the frog is dead and didn't even know it was boiling. It's that, because if you do it overnight, if you do it in a month, right, if you do it all at once, then obviously people are going to see exactly what you're doing, and the opportunity for them to coalesce and rebel and resist is greater. So if you do it very slowly, you let people, not very slowly, but slower than immediate, then you allow people to not recognize how fast you're actually moving. But a lot of this is incredibly fast. You know, the dismantling of civil rights enforcement, where they've now taken the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, and they've essentially said, we're going to freeze all the investigations, or the vast majority of the investigations we were doing before, which involved, you know, discrimination against Black kids, against Latino kids, against women as women, against LGBTQ folks, against disabled folks. We're just going to put that on hold. And our new priorities, according to Harmeet Dillon, who's the head of the Civil Rights Division, are going to be the following, you know, fighting anti-white bias through DEI programs, number one. Number two, protecting girls and women, but not from like male rapists and discrimination against them as women, but from trans women who we believe still apparently are going to go into bathrooms and do something awful to them. The other priority is going to be stopping voting by non-citizens, which every single study that's been done says is just not a thing in any statistically significant way. And the only time it does happen is when people are accidentally put on the rolls. They didn't even know they were getting on the rolls illegally. That somebody just told them they could sign up. They got on the rolls, and it's like a handful of cases. But that's now a priority. You know, this is the kind of stuff. Oh, and one of the other priorities, denaturalizing as many naturalized citizens as we can for any minor infraction. Anything you do, anything the government deems you a danger or a threat, which could just be your political views, right? If you have social media that, I don't know, is in some way critical of Israel, you will be guilty of, you know, anti-Semitism in their mind, and you will now be a threat. And if you're a naturalized citizen, they're saying we're going to try to denaturalize you. That stuff isn't even really being talked about in the press because there's so many other things, I guess, that seem bigger. But as an anti-racism educator, activist, and civil rights, you know, person, I see that, and I realize that when you shift the priorities of this crown jewel of the Department of Justice, such that 70% of their lawyers have now quit, that's going to be very hard to come back from, right? Because even if and when we get a different president and a different, you know, executive branch, what's going to happen? Are all those good folks now that have gone and found other jobs, are they going to come back, or are we going to be starting from scratch? So this is how authoritarianism has a very long shelf life. Even if you're able to overcome the immediate threat, the damage systemic and structurally is going to remain for a very long time.
Several good points. Immigration, the Immigrant Legal Resource Center is a great organization. ILRC, I'm familiar with, and they have a whole explainer about how denaturalization works. Recently, the Department of Justice published a memo listing out its priorities for civil enforcement cases. In that memo, the DOJ states it will be focusing on denaturalization cases, and they go on to explain it. But I mentioned this or give it a little bit more because I wasn't familiar with it until you just talked about it.
Yeah. It's a serious problem because it's an entirely subjective process. People they become naturalized citizens. They've gone through all the right steps to become citizens of the United States. I've been in naturalization ceremonies before. I've watched them, and they're really very fascinating. What you see in a naturalization ceremony where people are becoming citizens, these are folks who desperately want to be here. They have to pledge a kind of allegiance to American values as part of the process. They have to pass a civics test that probably most native-born Americans could not pass, to be perfectly honest. They have to know more about our country than we tend to have to know about it. But the problem is that in spite of their, I would say, almost hyper-patriotism, right, their absolute embrace of this country, what they're now going to be told is if you do anything at all that we find to be, it could be a misdemeanor offense, it could be a minor drug charge, it could be a social media post that we don't like. I mean, we've got people just trying to visit this country right now who are being stopped and questioned in airports about their social media. And these are American citizens that are coming back into the United States, as well as native-born American citizens, as well as naturalized citizens who are coming in here, as well as people who were just coming in to present papers at academic conferences or whatever. And then, you know, and they're coming in from Canada or they're coming in from Europe, wherever they're coming from. And they're being told, well, you can either come in without your computer because we're going to seize this or whatever, or you can go back home. That's happening now. And so the denaturalization process is going to be as much about the whims of the Secretary of State, perhaps, or the Department of Justice, looking at someone's social media feed, looking at what they do for a living and saying, you know what, you're not in line with the policies of our administration, and therefore we deem you a threat to the national security of the United States, and we're going to have you removed. And that is what they are talking about doing. It is what will happen if we do not immediately, rise up to stop that kind of authoritarian measure from taking place.
And we're not doing that, it would seem so. None of what we're talking about right now, what we always talk about, could happen. None of what's happening could happen without the expressed written consent of the Supreme Court of the United States. And they weighed in this week with a real whopper. I mean, I always want to talk to you about a lot of things, but when I saw this, I said, we got to get Tim. I have to understand the implications and seriousness of this decision. And as you said, there's so much happening every day that's so consequential. But on Monday morning, the Supreme Court allowed ICE to resume racially profiling all Latinos in Los Angeles under the suspicion that they might be, quote, illegal immigrants. The order is technically temporary, allowing racial profiling to happen only until the court reviews the full record. But the Republican justices made it incredibly clear, Ellie Mistal writes at The Nation magazine, whenever the court gets around to vote on the merits of the case, they will still be in favor of racially profiling. And this is a extremely consequential decision. He goes on to say, in a rare example of honesty from this administration, it admitted that it was racially profiling Latinos and promised to do so if the Supreme Court lifted the injunction. The government admitted it was only looking at 4 factors before pulling people off the street: their apparent race or ethnicity, whether they spoke Spanish or spoke English with an accent, Jesus, the type of location where they were found, say a Home Depot or a restaurant, a farm, and finally the type of job they appeared to do, say, a hard one that others won't. What are your thoughts on this decision and the audacity of it and the consequences of it, specifically for brown-looking, Spanish-sounding, speaking-sounding people that do certain jobs?
Well, first, let's just be clear. The Supreme Court as a body did not weigh in. Only Brett I Like Beer Kavanaugh really decided to weigh in on behalf of this decision. The others on his side decided to remain quiet.
Well, they all voted. They all voted, but in terms of writing a
That's right. They didn't weigh in because they didn't actually explain their decision, because that's what they do with this shadow docket. They've done decision after decision after decision, which they don't feel the need to explain to the American people, which is fascinating. Now, Brett Kavanaugh's decision, what's interesting about that, and he does like beer. I think he might have had more than a few when he decided to write this opinion, because what he's saying in this opinion is that it is perfectly valid to use these markers, which are clearly markers of race and ethnicity and class status, but the combination of those things is going to clearly disproportionately impact and is intended to disproportionately impact people and target people of a particular race or ethnic background. He's saying that is perfectly fine. This coming from the same guy and his colleagues on his side of the aisle, the same people who tell us that we cannot use race-conscious policy to include people in higher education. We cannot look at race and identity as a way to expand opportunity and include people, but we can use race and ethnicity as a way to exclude people from our society, to round them up and put them in jail pending some investigation of their citizenship, that we can simply presume them on the basis of their identity to be criminals, and we can detain them. We can't let them go to a college or university by thinking about what their identity might say, let's say, about their experiences and the things they've had to overcome, but we can use their race and ethnicity as a way to make sure that they have even more to keep overcoming, because we're just going to keep dumping on them. It is the weaponization of colorblindness. They will use colorblindness when it suits their purposes, which is to say, to maintain white hegemony or reestablish white hegemony in higher ed or in the, in the realm of the workforce by getting rid of affirmative action, getting rid of DEI. But they will be highly color conscious if it means that we can detain and regulate and marginalize brown people and persons of color more broadly. That's what this is going to do. And the idea that it's not racial profiling, and the argument's fascinating, because when Kavanaugh writes this, one of the things he says that's so bizarre is he says, if you're a citizen, if you're here legally, they'll be nice to you. They'll let you go in a very quick manner. Like, it'll just be a few minutes of inconvenience. It's like this man doesn't have a television, doesn't keep up with the news, doesn't pay attention to what's happening, and didn't even read the briefs that were filed in the case. Because even if he's not media savvy, even if he's too busy drinking the beer and whatever he's doing, harassing women or whatever he's known for doing historically, he is not somebody who doesn't read the briefs. I'm assuming he read the case that was brought by the plaintiffs. He read what their complaints were. And if you read their complaints, and they're not alone in this, but they talk about their experiences, which were being manhandled, not being asked any questions before they were detained, being aggressively grabbed, thrown in a van or whatever, and taken to a detention center. There's nothing that's minor about that. There's nothing that's temporary about that. That is a scarring experience. And it's one that no white man like Brett Kavanaugh or either of us will ever have to fucking experience in this country. That will never happen to us. And it's precisely the fact that it never has happened to us and that it never will happen to us that we keep getting bullshit decisions like this from people who are opining about and making law about things that they do not understand.
Oh, man.
And I think that is the fundamental problem with this decision is it does not pay attention even to the facts in this case, let alone the logic of the Constitution.
So, I mean, and how big of a deal is this in terms of the history of decisions based on race? I guess maybe it's temporary, but I just felt, Tim, like this decision deserved a lot more and deserves a lot more attention in terms of, as I said, the kind of blatant honesty and audacity of it. We were led to believe and have been led to believe that we were protected from this kind of racial profiling in the U.S. Constitution.
Well, yeah, we probably thought that we would never see law enforcement agents on the streets covering their faces because they didn't want to let anybody know who they were, unwilling to show badges, not wearing an official uniform, unwilling to show warrants that actually allow them to search, and then getting pissy when you ask for one. That is the kind of stuff that we would have said, that sounds like Argentina in the 70s or Chile in the 70s and 80s. Or that sounds like, Bulgaria, I guess, in the 70s and 80s and before the fall of the Soviet bloc. That sounds like the kind of stuff that we would have thought only happens in those other countries. And the idea that, we've got to, ICE has to be able to cover their face because they're going to get doxxed. Dude, I've been doxxed 5 times. Nobody's coming to protect me from being doxxed. I get my life threatened all the time because people find out my address. So you're telling me that an ICE agent somehow has rights that the rest of us don't have? And if that is your argument, that ICE should be able to cover their faces so they don't get doxxed, then why not apply that to every cop in America? Why just ICE? Every police officer could be doxxed, right? Oh my God, if I ask a cop for his name and badge number, what am I going to do? Dox him? Welcome to the world, precious. In this world, the odds of you getting doxxed are really, really high. And if you don't like that, maybe don't do shit that makes people want to dox you, like act like a fascist. I already realize that fascists are going to come for people like me because I'm anti-fascist. I understand that. It's a risk that I take. But I think the idea that there are people who deserve to be protected from criticism, protected from being identified, if you were so proud of being an ICE agent, then show your face. And all those people, I'm sure you saw the story last week, I think it was, of the big ICE recruiting festival. I think it was in Texas. And all these, wannabe cowboys and wannabe soldiers and burnouts that have always wanted to be big bad lawmen, right? Decided they would show up. One guy was like, I'm going to be the guy that puts your face in the pavement. Okay, dude, if you're such a badass, show your face, right? Let us see who you are. That is where we are in America, is we have got completely anonymous people rolling up on folks on the street, coming to people's houses, using flashbang grenades, bursting through doors, not even telling anyone who they are. And I got news for you. If somebody like that, eventually somebody's going to get killed, and it's not just going to be the person that they're coming for. It's going to be somebody who's standing their ground against people whose identity they don't know. If anyone else rolls up to your house with their face covered, wearing, civilian clothes and guns and tries to break in, what are you going to do? You're going to shoot their ass. I certainly wouldn't hesitate. Right. So I think it's fascinating. You want to talk about actually putting ICE agents' lives in danger. It's not from doxing. This behavior is going to get some of them killed.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. But, I don't think not pushing back on, but the idea that every ICE agent is incentivized by the job and doing the job and wanting to be a dick to the certain type of people. I mean, I would argue to a certain extent, a lot of people are probably signing up for ICE. That maybe they're apathetic, maybe they're not, but maybe they just need the money, because that is a pretty good gig, by the way. $50,000 signing bonus. What job in the public sector has ever offered much like that? Of course, there's always incentives to join the military and law enforcement and so on. But I mean, they gave so much money to Homeland Security that they could dangle money in an economy like ours, in a wealth inequality like ours. You expect a lot of people to sign up, just be like, listen, I got to feed my family. I'm going to have to join ICE. And seeing that line made me think of just everybody that became a stormtrooper and put on the helmet because, it seemed like they could provide their family with a good living if they all lived on the Death Star together.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that there are people like that, although the ones that were at the job fair seem to be really into the violence part.
I didn't see this.
But yeah, I'm sure there are some. When you bribe them to, it's like, if I can bribe you to be a Nazi, what is the going price for a Nazi? What is the reserve wage, as labor economists would call it, for being a Nazi this month? And apparently it's $50,000 signing bonus, right? So this is the thing. When your administration can't create jobs in any other area, when your administration is literally destroying jobs, destroying manufacturing jobs, raising tariffs in a way that's going to hurt American productivity and the economy, doing all the things that they're doing that are not producing actual jobs, the only thing that's going to be left is, well, it's okay, you can become an ICE agent until we get all these brown people out of here. That is their employment plan. Just like their housing plan for poor people is prison or mental institutions, because they'd rather do that than actually solve the problems that poor folks face. And the plan for struggling working class people is, well, originally we were thinking that you would work in a plant somewhere, but we realized we're not going to really build any manufacturing plants with this economy. So we'll just put you, we'll give you a gun, we'll give you a badge, we'll give you the ability to beat people with impunity, and we'll pay you a lot of money to do it. So it is the same kind of grift, the same kind of bribery with which this man, his whole family, and many members of his administration are intimately familiar. It's sort of the way that they live. It's what they do.
In the live chat, you can watch most of my interviews live now on YouTube and other places. My friend Tina writes, my cop friend in Houston tells me ICE hires all the wannabe law enforcement officers who can't get hired to be cops.
I believe that. No, I think ICE actually makes your average, everyday local cop seem like a really good person by comparison, right? Like, I mean, we all know there are plenty of awful, just regular cops, but I don't have any doubt that by comparison, ICE is getting the bottom feeders who can't even get into the regular police force, or they've been overly disciplined and they're one of the few that found it impossible to get a new job after a disciplinary problem. Most of the time, average everyday cops have a discipline file that's, as long as you're armed, they can still find a job somewhere. The ones who can't are really especially bad, and they're probably the ones who were looking to be ICE agents. It's those kind of guys who want that level of authority, and they want to take out that authority on very particular communities. How much fun is it to enforce traffic laws against white drunk drivers and teenagers coming back from keggers when you can go harass brown folks who speak with an accent, that you don't like? I mean, that's so I'm sure there are people joining ICE who are doing it for the money. I'm sure there are people who signed up and worked as stormtroopers, not just on the Death Star, but for Hitler, who had the same motivation. I'm sure there have always been people who did things for the money, but what they're doing is still fundamentally immoral and unethical and should be condemned and called out for that.
They're defending their culture. The ad, join.ice.gov, serve your country, defend your culture. No undergraduate degree required, Tim. That means I qualify. But I don't know what my culture is. I'm not sure what I'm defending.
Well, Eric Schmidt just told you, the senator from Missouri, right? He just explained in that speech at the National Conservatism Conference that it's white Christians. He just said it's the Pilgrims. It's our people from. I mean, it was a blatantly white nationalist speech that he just gave. And in that speech, he did not even allow that black people were real Americans. He did not allow that any people of color were. He essentially said this was our Christian forefathers, our Pilgrim forefathers. They're the ones who forged this nation. It belongs to us. So it is clear that what Eric Schmidt believes is that the culture of America is white. And it's not just white like in the expansive broad way, because if you actually listen to the speech or you read the transcript, which is available online, you will find that it doesn't even include what we would consider white ethnics. There's no acknowledgement of the, let's say, I don't know, post 1875, 1880 waves of immigration, the Italians, the Greeks, the Jews, others who have sort of matriculated into the club of whiteness. They're not even included. And Schmidt, who is Catholic, I believe, it's interesting. It's like he has a vision of America that's clearly a WASP vision. He's actually talking about like the founding generation as being the only true Americans, which is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant vision. So what's really important for white folk, quote unquote, white folks to understand is some of these white folks don't love y'all either, right? There are a lot of white folks who are Italian, who are Irish, who are Greek, who are Jews, who are quote unquote ethnics. They don't love you. They don't love them any more than they love any person of color, right? At the end of the day, once they get done coming for black and brown folk, they'll come for these people who aren't white enough. Schmidt's speech, I'm going to tell you right now, is as close to a David Duke speech as any speech that I've ever heard given by a national politician. It's more so than anything Pat Buchanan ever said in public.
I didn't know, I was not off, but I was not paying attention to the news, and I didn't know about this either. Senator Eric Schmidt, he's a Missouri senator, he gave the speech at the National Conservatism Conference.
Yeah.
And yes, I'm just seeing it now, and it is real. What is an American is the name of the speech.
Right.
And he also let certain white nationalist group fly a flag or something. I'm seeing some controversy. Like it looks pretty bad. I hadn't heard about it.
No, it's straight Nazi shit. Like it is straight Nazi shit. And the fact that no one is really pointing it out or talking about this in any major way, the fact that you didn't even know about it until I mentioned it, tells you that the media is failing in its job to tell us who these people are.
To be fair, a black man knifed a white woman on a train somewhere or something.
Oh, well, of course. And Eric Bolling has told us now that, and he wants, former Fox host, disgraced Fox host, which takes a lot to become a disgraced Fox host. Like that's hard. That's hard to do. You got to do a lot of shit to get disgraced. Eric Bolling wanted us to make sure we knew when he went on his rant the other day that it was a thug black. Right. You have to know that it's a thug black because somehow that's relevant. The fact that this guy, you look into the history of this assailant, it was a terrible crime. This guy's got a history of schizophrenia. He's got a history of mental illness. But you see, we don't allow black and brown folks when they commit crime to be mentally ill. But if you're a white person that shoots up the post office, a white person who shoots up the school, a white person who does anything, these folks will say, well, A, it's certainly not the guns. And in this case, of course, it was a knife that the guy used in the crime that we're talking about. But it's not the weapons, but it will be mental illness. But if it's a black guy and he happened to attack a white woman, oh, well, it's got to obviously be a racial attack. There were other white people that guy comes in contact with every day. He didn't stab them. There's no evidence this was it was a horrible crime. It was a horrible crime, but it is the result of untreated mental illness. And I would point out, as I have many times, whenever the right screams mental illness about gun crimes, they don't want to fund mental illness either. They don't have a plan to deal with mental illness, whether it's the mental illness of a school shooter or whether it's the mental illness of this black dude on the train or on the subway. They don't want to deal with mental illness. Their only plan is let's lock them up. Let's have forced institutionalization. Let's throw away the key, put them on Thorazine and let them rot in some facility, which is not a plan. So yeah, we ought to deal with that horrible crime. But the idea that that's more important than Eric Schmidt proclaiming that America is this ethno-national thing. We're not an idea. We're not even a multiculture. We're not, forget even the melting pot. And I know the melting pot thing is problematic because sometimes, everybody's talked about that where, you melt everything together and you lose all the distinct flavors, whatever. But at least the melting pot idea, which most people, over 50 were certainly raised with, at least that suggested that we were a combination of things. And what Eric Schmidt is saying is, yeah, fuck all that. Like, we're not, man. We are just the chicken stock. That's all we are. And really bland, unseasoned chicken stock, as a matter of fact, at that. That's all we are. And that's all we are ever going to be. And that's what we should be. It's sort of like he's saying anyone who says America is an idea doesn't understand. No nation has ever just been an idea. No nation is yes, that's the point, Eric. No other nation has ever been that. The whole point of this country was that we were different than that. That was the whole American exceptionalist shit that they've been pushing for my entire life, was we're different. And now Eric Schmidt's saying, no, we're not different. We want to be just like – are we just like the country we broke away from? It's just blood and soil. It's just ancestry. Then what makes America special? Well, in his mind, what makes us special is some type of Aryan bloodline. And I think the media ought to be paying attention to that rather than whatever nonsense they're focused on most of the time.
Yes. Well, what does the media pay attention to, and why, and who is the media? Lots of questions. I always love to talk with you about media in general. The media has certainly been focused a lot on the last two issues I want to talk to you about. We'll leave Epstein and the controversy around that for last. But the one I really wanted to make sure I talked to you about, because I've been talking to you about this as long as I've been talking to you, and you've been writing and working to change this paradigm and educate people about it. Crime and race, and how to solve issues around crime and race, and why crime takes place in certain communities and not other communities, and so on and so forth. I actually thought the New York Times podcast was really good on this morning. There are a lot of people who feel safer when there are more uniformed police officers, etc., on the street. They feel safer now when the National Guard or Marines are on the street, apparently. And I guess crime may be down. But if you ask anybody on the street if crime is down, they'll say, yeah, maybe this week. But when they leave, it's coming back. Or they say, it's not down. It's just not happening in the street. It's now happening upstairs in that apartment, whether it be drugs and so on. But it's far more obviously than that. And we can talk about where these infusions of police officers are going. But just the conversation around crime and policing has been one we've been having for a really long time. And people make it very literally black and white, but they make it very binary and simple all the time. When in fact, if you just ask yourself why crimes aren't committed, a lot of violent crimes especially aren't committed in wealthier and affluent neighborhoods and communities, including those that are, by the way, densely populated. Let's try to get to the bottom of this. Where do you want to start on debunking the myths about more cops, more peace, and how people feel about crime?
Right. Well, look, there are interesting studies on this, and they are conflicting, and I want to be very transparent about them. There are some studies which would suggest that done the right way, additional police on the street can have a deterrent effect on crime, and far better than harsh sentences. Our problem in this country is mostly that we try to solve the problem on the back end with harsh sentences, which do not deter, as opposed to productive use of law enforcement. Now, I want to qualify what I'm saying. That doesn't mean flood the zone with a shit ton of new cops. It doesn't mean we need 1 million new police. It means we need to be deploying police in a more strategic way. And I've long advocated, I think we probably talked about this, maybe even going back to 2020. I've long advocated the idea that in order to be a cop, especially in an urban community of color with a long history of conflict between law enforcement and the community, that you ought to have to be on a probationary period for 3 to 4 months, where the first 3 to 4 months of your time as an officer, you have to walk the beat, talk to people, meet people on their porches, go into their bodegas, go into their churches, go into their barbershops, and spend that time almost more like you're a community organizer, getting to know the people you're going to be working with before you were actually allowed to arrest them. And then at the end of that 3 to 4 months, the community would take a vote on whether or not you get to police in their community. Not the chief, not the fact that you can fire a gun and run fast and meet all the requirements of being an officer, but that you also have the humility needed to be able to go into those spaces and not be an occupier. It's not necessarily the presence of police. It is the way that we train police. It is the culture of policing that needs to be changed. If the culture of policing is addressed and the way that we choose police is addressed, then the presence of police will not necessarily be the problem. The problem is that we have a culture of policing which encourages a mentality of control and domination over certain populations. Now, in places like DC, what we're seeing is, yeah, you've got soldiers on the street, but they're not going to Southeast. Now, I'm not saying the folks in Southeast necessarily want them there. I'm sure they might in certain cases, but in other cases, they might be very afraid to have them there. But what I'm pointing out is that they're not going to the places with the highest elevated crime rates because of crowded housing, because of dilapidated infrastructure, because of socioeconomic factors that are highly correlated with violent offending in literally 32 countries where this has been studied. They are spending time around the monuments because their only real goal is to make sure that kids like Big Balls don't get their ass beat and their cars crashed. That's why this is happening, is because Big Ball's balls weren't as big as the 15-year-old who kicked the shit out of him to take his car. And so because he got beaten up, we now have to have an occupied Capitol. And let's keep in mind, I'm sure that crime has dropped in the last couple of weeks since this happened. That's not shocking. But the point is that cannot be the basis for justifying the decision. Because if we're just going to say anything that works is okay, well, you know what would really work? We could just have sex-selective abortions for all men, not allow any boys to be born. And I promise you in 25 years, we will have almost no violent crime because 91% of all the violent crime in America is committed by dudes, and not trans dudes, not trans women, but by cisgender men. So we could do that, or we could just have preventive detention for every young person between the age of 18 and about 25 because they have a disproportionately elevated rate of criminal offending. Just like put them all on an island like Lord of the Flies until they're 26 and then bring them back. I get, like, you could do any of those things and they would all quote unquote work, but we have a constitution. We have due process. You don't just take away people's rights because that will make us safe. North Korea doesn't have a lot of street crime. China doesn't have a lot of street crime. I don't think we actually want to live like that. I certainly hope not. So the idea that what works, no matter what it is what we ought to do doesn't make sense. What we do know is what does work and what is working right now in places like Baltimore and in places like Chicago, contrary to popular belief, where they're doing violence interrupters. They've got people who have been involved in gang activity and other criminal activity in the past who are working with folks in the community to steer them in different directions. That is having actually more of an effect than all the flood the zone policing that Donald Trump would want to do. So we do know that there are things that can reduce crime. There are things that have reduced crime. Right now, the violent crime rate in most of these large cities is the lowest it has been in some cases since the mid-1960s, certainly the case in Chicago, certainly less violent than it was in the early 1990s. And it's hilarious when you poll people who were like 30 years old in 1991, 1992, you'd think they'd be really on top of like their surroundings and what was going on. You ask them, is crime worse now or better now than it was in the early 90s? And almost invariably, they say, oh, it's worse. It's worse. And it's not by any stretch of the imagination worse. Now, I realize that if you're somebody who's been victimized, the fact that the aggregate numbers are down is not going to impress you. Of course, that's not a sufficient answer to say that crime is down. But what it does tell us is that crime waxes and wanes as the result of certain factors in the economy that make it come down over time or make it go up. The big bump that we had from 2020 to 2021, I wonder what happened in that year. It wasn't the racial justice uprising. It was the pandemic breaking the bonds of community that we know from all the criminological research are critical to keeping violent offending down. When people are out of work, when their mental health is being affected by, the extreme isolation that we experienced for a long time in the earliest waves of COVID, of course you're going to have increase in domestic violence, which apparently Donald Trump doesn't even think is criminal.
Yeah, I heard.
Increase in all kinds of violence because people are going to be on a short fuse. But now that we're still, I do want to point out, we are still having a problem with COVID, but we're away from some of the highest, worst days of it as a result of people getting back to work and getting back to something approximating normalcy. Then, of course, some of that tension is going to dissipate. Some of that, being constantly on the edge emotionally is going to dissipate, and the crime rates are going to come back down. The lesson in that is that what we on the left have said always about crime is demonstrably true. When things get worse socioeconomically, things get worse in terms of community and the connection that people have with one another, crime will go up. When things get better, crime will go down. It isn't because we flooded the zone and built a bunch more prisons. Crime continued to drop after the prison binge of the 80s and 1990s. Crime continued to drop after stop and frisk was ended in New York City. Crime continued to drop even when we got rid of all these get tough policies, the broken windows policing bullshit. When that stuff started going out the window, crime continued to drop. So all the get tough stuff in the world only can work for a very limited amount of time. Over the long run, the only way that you keep criminal offending low is by attending to the socioeconomic factors that are underpinning most violent offending. And that isn't just true in this country. That has been shown literally in like 32 different countries that I know of over the years.
Throughout human history, yeah. Well said. Finally, got to ask you your take on anything around the latest developments with all things Jeffrey Epstein. Just two quick things. According to a transcript search database search over the past 3 weeks, Fox News has mentioned Epstein just 429 times. CNN, 3,668. MSNBC, 5,624. That's just 3 cable television, quote, news outlets. But I saw this headline as well. A MAGA influencer who Trump gave Epstein binder is now attacking Epstein's victims. I mean, you knew they didn't actually care about the victims. They were always using them. And now, apparently, at least some of them are attacking them. Nothing, I think, could be less surprising from the basket of deplorables. But what do you make of Trump wanting this to end the way he said COVID would end? It's over. It's done. And what do you make about Republicans who ran on this now are now running away from it?
Well, of course they are. This is a cult. This is a cult of people who say things like the Secretary of HUD just did at a conference the other day, that God anointed and appointed you. This, sacrilegious. That's sacrilegious. You've got a cabinet meeting, a week ago where, it's basically a circle jerk where the cabinet members just go around seeing who can teabag Donald Trump better than the next person, right? And it's just like, no, I can do better. Watch this, watch
Climbs
this. I
up
will
on
do
table.
even better. Then I don't think I've ever said teabag on a podcast before, but there it is. In any event, that's the kind of sycophancy that we're dealing with. You got Mike Johnson saying, well, I think he was an FBI informant. Where did that come from? Pulled that out of his ass. They are looking for every excuse in the world, but all we really need to look, here's the thing. We know they don't care about rape victims. We know they don't care, but this is a side of the aisle that actually, embraces people like Andrew Tate and his brother, who are rapists. These are people who actually flack for rapists and sexual assaulters, including the president of the United States, all the time. Somebody who has been adjudicated as having committed sexual assault. This is, and so they don't care. They don't care. And they, but one thing I think we should point out, and I don't give Donald Trump compliments very often, but he's very good at doodling the body of a young girl, because that's what he provided apparently to Jeffrey Epstein. That body that he drew on that
doesn't
little
look,
part, that was not
look like a grown
body.
woman.
That was a child's body. And of course, in the body of that message, he says there are certain things we have in common. I think we know what that is. And the fact that none of the people in his orbit are willing to stand up to him, or very few. I'm not going to say none. A few are. But God forbid, when Marjorie Taylor Greene is one of the few people who will actually be critical, you're in trouble. Like that's not helpful when that's, one of the few people who will actually show up, even if it's only for her own aggrandizement, to make some kind of a statement. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, what do you think the strategy for elected Democrats, much less progressive activists or whoever we like to call ourselves, like me and other people in media, should be doing vis-a-vis this issue, the Epstein? Because we hear this common idea that we should not let it go away. We should keep asking about it, keep talking about it. Who are they protecting? Kind of the way that they were for a very long time, but seem to have gone quiet, most of them. Well, what should be the strategy?
I think the way to talk about it that will be expansive, because look, all the people who actually, were always concerned about Jeffrey Epstein, some of the, and who were still maybe the part of the MAGA coalition that is upset at Donald Trump right now. And there are some. Who are pissed at him for Joe Rogan, and people like that in that sort of orbit. I know they're not heavy Trumpers, but they certainly enabled him. They're apparently appalled. So that's a good thing. They're going to stay appalled. What I think we have to do is point out the connection of this issue to these broader issues of elite domination that the left and progressives always care about, or at least should, right? So in other words, why is Donald Trump covering up for rich people like Jeffrey Epstein? Why was he in bed with him, figuratively speaking, or at least with some of his women, perhaps, or girls, through all this time that they were friends? Well, because rich people like to be around and empower other rich people. This is the corruption of the Trump administration, covering up for rich people, and other people in the Republican Party covering up for rich people, going soft on Ghislaine Maxwell and allowing her to have a sweetheart deal to be in a quote unquote better prison. Because again, these are rich and powerful people, and what Donald Trump cares about are rich and powerful people and protecting them, whether that's in the tax code, whether that's when they are rapists, whether that's when whatever it is. That's who he protects. That's who he cares about. And so I think if we link this sort of oligarchic connection to Jeffrey Epstein, it's of a piece with his oligarchic connection to Elon Musk and all the tech bros. It's all the same thing. These are people who don't give a damn about average everyday people, because the only average everyday folks in that equation on Jeffrey Epstein's island were the girls who were being trafficked, right? None of them were rich. He wasn't trafficking rich kids. He was trafficking, middle class, working class kids, people who were more desperate or were in a bad situation and could be taken advantage of. He wasn't trafficking the children of tycoons and oil barons and billionaires, right? He was taking advantage of people without money by throwing his money around. That's all Donald Trump has ever known. That's all Jeffrey Epstein ever known. That's all that any of these people believe in, is using their money to get what they want. Jeffrey Epstein did it. Donald Trump did it, and he's done it all his life. So when average everyday people talk about Donald Trump stands up for people like me, well, he's not standing up for people like your daughters. He's not standing up for people that that live on your block. He's standing up for rich people who are rapists, because he himself is that. That's why.
That was going to be the last question, but it just made me think of RFK Jr., and I just wanted to ask you what you thought of his latest move at HHS and the damage that he is doing by being alive.
Well, I said it the other day on social media, and I do mean it. I wish the man would have gotten therapy after his childhood trauma rather than live to take out his trauma on the rest of us. If his father had just gone out the front of the fucking ambassador instead of the kitchen, we wouldn't be here right now. And we wouldn't be facing a polio outbreak or a TB outbreak or whatever the hell's coming, right? And I don't mean to be cruel by saying it. I understand that he was traumatized, but he's now willing to traumatize others in the name of this absolutely quackish philosophy of which he is a part, and apparently the head cheerleader. And I get it. The brain worm, is still in there. I get it. Heroin is a powerful drug, and he might well be back on it. I get it. Certainly his voice sounds like he inhaled a bong hit like 30 years ago and hasn't released it yet.
That's not fair.
Understand, like, lots of things happen that can mess you up, Bobby, but you don't need to take it out on the rest of us. And what he's going to do with this, with getting rid of not just the COVID vaccine, which I'm worried about. I've had COVID several times, and the fact that I may not be able to get it, again, in spite of the fact that I have certain risk factors, but it's going to be up to the, you've got Walgreens and CVS and other pharmacies that are just saying, like, we can't do it. You've got doctors that are saying we will, but you're going to have the insurance isn't going to cover. You have to pay $200 or whatever for it, right? This is just flat out going to kill people. It's going to flat out kill people while he's sitting there saying, well, just get sunshine and go work out in the gym in jeans. Can we just who works out in jeans?
It is probably, of everything he's done and said, I can't think of anything more egregious than, I've never seen it. By the way, I've been a gym rat for a lot of my life as a personal trainer. I've never seen it. It's worse than skiing in jeans, as a matter of fact. That almost makes some logical sense, but yes, it's a great point.
And Bobby Kennedy is another example. Bobby Kennedy, Jeffrey Epstein, all the people around, the tech bros around JD Vance, Peter Thiel, all these guys, Elon Musk, they all have this incredible narcissism in common. They all think they're smarter than people who've actually done the reading. Right. They all think they're smarter than people who did the reading, and they think that just because of their name or their money. Even if their name and their money came from inheritance, even if their name and their money, as in Elon's case, came from, starting out a white South African, which sort of, had he been a black South African, we wouldn't know who he is right now. He wouldn't be the richest man on the planet. He obviously had benefits under the system of apartheid that allowed him to get where he was. And then, of course, he's got public contracts that have done the vast majority of the rest. And now his board, talk about sycophants, is saying we're going to make him the first trillionaire if he hits these targets. Yeah. Like, what are we talking about? A trillionaire. I looked it up the other day and because I was curious. And so I don't use AI too much because I don't want to contribute to the ecological destruction that is so common with that. But I did look up the other day something about, let me see if I can find it real quick. I've got it in here somewhere, about if you took Elon Musk's money and you strung it dollar for dollar, like lengthwise, what would how far would it stretch, right? Like, would it stretch to the moon and back? And if so, how many times? How many times would it go around the circumference of the Earth? And hold on, I'm going to find it here. If I can just, I didn't think I'd have to find this, but if you give me 2 seconds, I will.
Take your time. I mean, it's a kind of wealth. I mean, the idea.
Oh, go ahead.
I just think I have no quarter. I give no patience to. I don't have a lot of time to hear you defend that billionaires should exist. It doesn't compute with me. End billionaires, eat them all. They should all be eaten. I've said it. They should be eaten. I said it on CNN. Yeah. Billionaires should be eaten.
I agree. So here's the question I asked Perplexity. I said, if you laid all of Elon Musk's money end to end in $1 bills, how many times would it circle the Earth? It would wrap around the equator, Pete, 1,576 times. And then I asked, would Elon Musk's if Elon Musk's money was laid end to end in $1 bills, how many times would it stretch to the moon and back? And the answer to that is 81 times. His money would stretch 81 times to the moon and back. It would, I don't think it would make it to Mars, but I sure as shit wish he would.
That I'll leave it there. Tim Wise, always a pleasure to be in conversation with you, to have you on. We really appreciate your generosity, your continued leadership. It's always welcome, and I thank you so much, buddy. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
All right, there you go, everybody. Tim Wise. There he goes. Tim Wise on Twitter, at the African American Policy Forum. Read him at Medium. Get all of his books. They're all so good. And that is all I have for you. I hope to see you at tomorrow night's hangout. And I'm always happy when you join the show and when you reach out. Email me, standupwithpete@gmail.com, and go buy John Carroll's new album, johncarroll.org. That, my friends, is all I've got for you. I will talk to you tomorrow right here on Stand Up. Thanks for your support today, and take care of yourself. Be good to yourself. Find compassion for yourself. Sit in yoga pose and meditate. What else can I tell you? That's it for now. Bye-bye.
Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you gotta stand up, stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease, boy, you better stand up, stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know us right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You gotta stand up, that's right. You got to rise up, you got to stand up, you got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear and all you hear is a lie. Don't get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. Point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up. They had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We got to let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is see them flee the scene of that experiment. If you stand up, alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.